Hello, solopreneurs. Welcome to another session of the Solopreneur Life Podcast. Today, I am thinking about those early days when I first became a solopreneur. And you may be like I was, where anything goes. Like if they're breathing, they are clients. But there's a problem with that. And if you've been doing this for any length of time, like I have, you've discovered that there are some people who shouldn't be clients. There are others who make fantastic clients. But the question is, how do you know in advance which one you're getting involved with, which one you're signing up with? That's the question, right? So that's what we're going to dive in today. Welcome to the Solopreneur Life Podcast. I am your host, Kathryn Aragon, and here it is our mission to help solopreneurs and freelancers launch and grow a six-figure business with no overwhelm or burnout. Here you're going to learn the skills, habits, and mindsets that you need to build a business that's not only profitable, it's fun. So today, like I said, we are talking about what to look for in your best clients. Before we dive in though, take a second to subscribe. That's the way you're not going to miss a single episode. Now, here's where we're going to start. What are the qualities that you should be looking for in a new client? And you may have your own list. Basically you need to vet all of them, and you need to make sure they're a good fit. Because I promise you, just because they're breathing and are willing to pay you money does not mean they're a good client. It doesn't take long of doing this before you begin to find out, what works? What am I actually looking for? And I'm going to give you 3 qualities that are just the bare bones basic. You will come up with your own criteria, but start here. First, they value you and what you do. Now, let's dive into that for a minute, because just the fact that they're calling you and saying, hey, I want to hire you for this thing, or I want to talk to you about this thing, doesn't really mean they value you or your service. Now, here we are basically talking about services, because if you've got a product and it's just on your website, you're going to have sales copy, right? We're talking about clients who you have to have conversations with in order to close the deal, in order to figure out, how are we going to work together? What services am I going to give? And how are we going to nail it down, right? So we're talking about a client actually wanting and valuing what you do. This can get really confusing because, like I said, if they're calling you saying, hey, can you do this? Your first assumption is they must value it, but they don't always. And that's what you've got to get clear on. I have had clients who called me because somebody told them they should. It wasn't really something they valued. They weren't really committed. They just wanted to test the waters, and they thought I was a good person to test the waters with, I guess. So you want to make sure at some point, what specifically are you looking for? What outcome are you looking for? And make sure they've thought beyond, I should just call this person and find out how much they cost. Because that question alone, how much do you cost? That's a deal breaker. If that's the only thing they want to know, you've got a lot more discovery that needs to take place. And I've promised you in the past that we're going to talk more about sales. We're not doing that here, but here's what I do want you to be aware of. Discovery is the first stage of sales. So once you've got a contact and they're kind of a lead, you need to have a discovery call. You can do this over email, but I promise you it's going to work better if you do it over a Zoom call. Some kind of a live video call is going to help you read them better. You're going to see their face. You're going to be able to hear their voice. And one of your questions needs to be, what are you looking for? From all of these questions, what's your strategy? What's your end game? What are you looking for from this project? You're going to have an idea of how much thought they put into it. If they're not putting any thought into it before calling you, that's a red flag. So first, do they value what you do? All right. And parceled into that is, do they value you? If you get through discovery and you start talking terms and you start talking money. By the way, don't be afraid to talk about money. It's part of the discussion. If you give your price and they have a heart attack or fall over laughing, that's a major red flag. They don't value you enough to pay you respectable rates. Now, you are going to have a lot of different clients, all right? If your client happens to be an agency, they're subcontracting you, you won't be able to get the top rates. I'm just telling you that right off the bat. And it doesn't mean they don't value you. I've had agencies try to hire me in the past, and I couldn't afford to take their lower rate. But it wasn't because there was a red flag. It's simply they couldn't give me a higher percentage of their client's income. So you have to do the math to figure this one out. But do they value you? Do they see you as a professional? Are they willing to pay you a professional rate? Do they really like you? Because remember, people, and this is reciprocal, people hire people they know, like, and trust. So part of this discovery call is, do you like one another? They should like you, but you should like them. So make sure you vet this one first. They value you, they kind of like you is ideal because you're going to work together. And do they value what you do? Because if they don't, you're going to lose that client very quickly. You don't want someone who's kind of trying you out, they're not really sure of you, or they're kind of trying out what you do. Go for somebody who truly values what you do. Number 2, you know their audience and industry. Now, this goes back to this concept of niching or specializing. And I'm going to be honest, I resisted this for many, many years. I still do in a way. I haven't set this super narrow niche that I serve because what I do could serve a lot of different industries. So it's not like I need to choose that kind of a criteria for narrowing who I work with. But let me tell you this, I do have specialties. There are industries I know, and there are industries I don't know. And if I accept a project with an industry I don't know, you know what part of my conversation has to be? I have to be very, very honest with my potential prospect, and I have to say, I'm not an expert. So how are we going to work together? How will we transfer your knowledge to my brain? That's part of the discussion. And I'll be honest, there's such a huge learning curve figuring out a new industry that if you already are an expert in another industry, I recommend you stick with it. Anywhere you already have industry knowledge, you already know the audience, especially if you're a writer or you're building marketing materials or doing social media, anything along those lines where you're connecting with clients for your client, you need to know the area. You need to know how the people talk. You need to know what they care about. You need to know all the ins and outs of working with those people. If you don't, you're getting yourself in deep water, honestly, and probably without a life belt. So I want you to think about, how much time do I have to learn a new industry? If you don't, if you're busy, or if it's just it's just work, it's just a paycheck, think twice. This is not going to be a long-term good client. You need to know the industry and audience. You don't have to specialize. You don't have to limit yourself to a narrow niche, but it can help. And the better you know the industry, the better for you. So valuing you and what you do. Number 2, you already have some knowledge, some insider knowledge of the industry and the audience. And then number 3, do they actually have the budget to afford you without straining? I'm going to tell you this right off the bat. The clients that don't last a long time with me are the ones who were straining to afford me. If they don't already have the budget, if it's not already allocated, when money gets tight and when they need to cut the budget, you're the first person to go. That's just how it works. So you don't need to necessarily lower your prices, but you do need to find clients who can afford you. And remember I said part of the discovery call discussion, part of that conversation is, what's your budget? don't be afraid to ask that question. It doesn't mean you lose to ask that question first. And they may turn it around and say, well, I don't know yet. How much do you charge? What are your rates? And they will. They will try to turn it around, but this conversation has to start with somebody. It may as well be you. Give them a range. Let them know that here's what I typically charge for this type of work. And that's going to kick off a discussion that will help you glean whether or not they can actually afford you. If they can, great, keep talking. But if they can't, that's a huge red flag. So, what have we talked about here? So far, we've talked about the qualities, just 3 very basic qualities you need to look for in a client. Do they fit your profile? Are they somebody who respects you, who you feel you can work with? Do you know the audience and the industry enough to be able to work with them easily? And can they actually afford you? But I want to tell you a story. Now, see, all of my clients kind of fit this profile. I don't accept a client if they don't meet those 3 criteria, and also a few extras. But every now and then, I get a client who is something special. And I'm going to describe to you 3 more criteria that describe this ideal client. Because the ideal is something that it's so hard to come by. You can't set this as your niche. I'm going to just tell you that right off the bat. But when you see this client, that you're going to enjoy working with them. And that's the goal, isn't it? To build a business that you wake up to every day, just excited about getting to work. You start working with clients who you enjoy, you have fun working with them. So here's what I want you to look for to identify this kind of client. So you're having your conversation, right? And you already have subject matter expertise. Like you get who they're talking to. That's criteria 1. And notice that overlaps our previous one because this is so important. It makes your life easier not to have to learn a whole new audience, how they talk, what they care about. So start there. You must already know their industry or their audience because you need stuff you can draw from. And I'm speaking here as a writer. If I'm trying to write an article or a web page for a brand new industry, I have to start from zero. I have to go back to client research. I have to pick the brain of some subject matter expert. What do you even care about? Why would you pick this over something else? You see how much extra work that is. But if I already know that audience, I already know their triggers. I already know their fears and their hopes and their desires. I'm going to nail that project. So start with that. But then let's go on to 2 more criteria that are going to make this a really fun project. First, your values align. I have 2 clients in particular where this is just spot on. They have a personality, a way of approaching life or business that truly aligns with the way I live, the way I perceive the world, the way I communicate. And here's what that does. It means I can be truly myself when I am engaging with their copy or their social media posts or their audience. Let's say they really focus on kindness or love or engaging with other people. Or that's one of my clients. I have another client who she's speaking to strong women, to powerful women who have our ambitions and are trying to achieve great things. Both of those resonate with me in a way that makes it so easy for me to serve them. I can take on a project for them. I can write some words very quickly because it's just what I would have said. And I send it in and they're like, whoa, that was amazing. Why? Because I nailed it. And that brings me to the 3rd criteria. And this is especially true if you're a writer. So first, as I said, you already know the audience. Second, your values align. But third, especially for writers, their voice is the same as your voice. So again, you're not having to switch hats to write for this client. You're not having to shift gears to give them what they want. You just sit down and start pouring out your own thoughts, and it happens to be what they would have said. Now, this makes for a really fun project that you can move very quickly on. I actually had this experience just a week ago. It was a rush project, and I already knew the client. She was a previous client, so I had background material. I already know her audience. I am what part of the audience. I know the people she's speaking to. So I just sat down, framed the page, started writing, and there it was. And I was so excited when I turned it in. I felt proud of that because I got to express some of my innermost thoughts in that copy. Now that's what I'm talking about. When you turn in a piece of work, that it's as if you did it for yourself. You got to express yourself, not just your client, yourself in that project. There is some magic taking place. And that's what I want you to focus on. If you can fill your docket with that kind of client, you're going to have a blast every day that you go to work. Now, if you always are choosing clients that it's a struggle. Let's say you have a client in one industry, another client, let's say that's a B2B industry. You have another one in a B2C. You have another one in a complete opposite. Let's say you have 3 or 4 clients, but every one of them's in a different industry or have a different type of audience. You're going to be switching hats so often, you're going to get dizzy. Literally, you don't need to be doing that. You need to narrow the focus. And if that means niching, then niche. If, like me, you still resist that, don't call it niching, but focus. Create some focus to your business so you can pick up more of the ideal client who truly resonates with you. Because I promise it does make a difference. I turned in that one piece of copy. It took me one day to write it. When I turned it in, I was going to wait till the next day, but I was too excited. I really wanted to share it with my client because I wanted her to see what I'd done, and I knew she was going to love it. I knew it. Why? Because of that resonance, because our values align, our voices align. And the message I got back was, wow, this is perfect. This is hot. And that made it made my day. It made my week, in fact, because I felt so good about that project. That's what I want you to find, because that's really the secret to building a business you love. It's who are you working with? Are they people you like? Are they people you trust? Do you know them and their audience? Do you understand their voice and what they're trying to achieve? And can you step into that without even thinking about it? If you can, you've got a fantastic future ahead of you. But the trick is being able to identify these people early. So again, that comes down to your sales process. Just because they're breathing doesn't mean they're going to be a good client. You've got to have those discovery calls and really explore who they are and what they're trying to achieve. And then it is just testing. And when you test enough, you're going to isolate, who are the audiences I enjoy speaking with? Who are the people I do really good work with? I want more of those clients. Jonathan, what do you have to add?
I really liked what you said about vetting clients. I think, particularly when we're hungry.
Oh, yeah. Which sometimes we are.
We're willing to take on that client that we shouldn't have said yes to. And sometimes that's okay. That's legit. But one of the things that you said I thought was really interesting to remember is that when negotiating prices, it's okay to state your price, and it's okay to negotiate price.
Yes.
But don't flinch too soon. Let them think a little bit.
I think that the old adage, the person who brings up price first is the one who loses the conversation. That is a lie. Do not believe that. The client is going to sit there and be silent and make you bring it up first because they think that. They think they win if you start speaking. But guess what? The person who asks the questions is the one who's in power. I want you to remember that, so I'm going to say it again. If you are the one asking the questions, if you're the one bringing up the topic, you are the powerful person in the conversation. Don't be afraid to bring it up. because all that does is make you the leader of the meeting, of that conversation. You're the one guiding where it goes.
I like thinking about negotiating prices in terms of like when you go to buy a car. You know essentially what the car is worth, and you're trying to negotiate the price. Mm-hmm. You know the price may or may not be negotiable, but the salesman doesn't apologize for the value of the car.
That's right.
He's trying to get it at the best price he can get it, but at the end of the day, he can't go any lower than a certain amount, and he may have to let you walk away, and that's okay. Otherwise, you end up with that client you wished you had let walk away.
Right. And you will have some of those where later you're like, oh my goodness, why did I accept this client? But you know what? That's another power position. The ability to sit there and let them walk away. And I've mentioned this in other episodes of the Solopreneur Life podcast, where this one conversation where he like literally sat and accused me of overpricing because my price was almost as high as his price. And if you think about that for a minute, there were so many red flags going on. He didn't value me personally because he didn't think I was worth the same as him. He's a business owner. I'm a business owner. What makes him think I'm less valuable?
Yeah, see, that's a really good red flag to remember, because he should have seen you as, oh, this is someone who is on par with me. We can partner.
Yes.
We're going to be able to get more done because I'm not going to have to be leading the person along.
Yes, but instead, when he started pushing back, he was trying to shame me. He was trying to embarrass me that my rate was so impossibly high, which, by the way, it wasn't. I just sat there. And again, power. Think
right.
Power. You sit there very calmly. You don't need to defend your rates if you know your rate is good.
Well,
sit there.
That's a really important point to remember too. You have to know your value,
yes.
But you also have to know the value that you bring to that industry.
Yes.
Remember, we had a friend who was in marketing in Spain, and he, did marketing campaigns, designed logos, and I asked him what his prices were. He says, that depends on who you are.
That's right.
Because he did one logo for a small one-man shop, and it was one price. He did another for a national chain, and it was mega multiples of the cost. And I said, why the difference? The same amount of work. He says, because that one's going to be on the storefronts of 100 different cities. So it's worth more to them. So it's worth more to me.
And there's another aspect of that. When we're talking about value, we're talking about pricing. And again, we can do a whole episode on this. But always remember that your price sheet is your base. You will need to sometimes, for some clients, you may need to discount it just a tiny bit. Try not to, because your rate should reflect what you need to survive. But if you are working with an enterprise company and you charge too low, they're going to value you less. So and this is why pricing gets scary. And I think it's why we're afraid to go there, because you don't know which reaction you're going to get. Are you going to get the guy trying to shame you because you priced too high, or are you going to get the people who shame you because you priced too low?
Well,
it's a gamble.
That brings up another interesting point, is like, how do I set prices? And you do need to do the homework for your industry to know what they're asking for and what it's worth. Mm-hmm. And then know, but when you present these prices, you can say, well, normally what I charge is this, but we can adjust that for your budget, but depending on the deliverables. You can adjust the number, the frequency, and this is where in last year's event, the Solo Summit event last year, Russ Henneberry talked about productizing your services, and that comes down to basically packaging what you do in ways that you can price it in. If you get this, and this, it's cheaper than getting them individually, and it encourages basically an upsell. It also gives them an idea of what they're getting for that price, and then it gives you the freedom to adjust the budget without necessarily cheapening your prices, because you can lower the deliverables.
And see, that is such an important thing. And by the way, let me throw this in. If you want more of that kind of goodness, then you need to come to Solo Summit this April. It is coming. We also have last year's recordings for sale if you want to actually listen to Russ Henneberry's presentation, because there's so much good stuff in there. And yes, the ideal client is not going to push back that hard. They're not going to diss you. They're going to understand and evaluate your prices based on the value you're giving them. But you have to know in advance. It's not guesswork for you. You have to know the industry. And that's why I said that twice. You need to, your basic foundational thing is, do you know the industry? But also for your ideal client, definitely you need to know the industry. I have some clients, their target audience is small businesses. And I'm like, I'm a small business. I know what I care about. That's a no-brainer. Another is the salesperson. And because of my history working with Sales Hacker and because of my experience selling in my own business, I can actually do that. Now, that one took a learning curve, but now that I've done it, now that I've gone through it, that's an industry I can work with. So you see, over time, you may accept clients who aren't ideal yet. And that's fine, especially if you're starting out or you're just getting your feet on the ground or you're trying to expand. You'll need time to have that learning curve. But once you're there, now you have several industries, maybe 2 that you can serve, maybe 3. But the idea is to actually focus enough that you know these people and you know their prices, you know what their agenda is, you know what they're trying to overcome, so you can have an intelligent conversation. And ideally, you're going to position yourself as the authority before price ever comes up. That's why I don't want you to worry about that too much. If you have positioned yourself properly, then it won't send a lot of red flags because you're going to understand how to price yourself. And they're going to understand the value you bring, and they're not going to push back.
Yeah, that's really good, and I like also what you just said there about bringing it back to the ideal client. If I am inside their head, if I'm inside their audience's head, and they are going to see me as that partner. Mm-hmm. I am going to bring them real value, not just perceived value, and as a result, we're going to end up being better fit for one another, which is going to make us enjoy that relationship longer. It's going to be more productive. We're going to have more enjoyment. I know, like with the 2 clients you referred to today, I know who you were talking about, and it's not a burden to when they ask for something because it is something that you're passionate about, that you feel strongly about. And the other thing is, particularly if you're new at this, if you're an inexperienced writer, you don't have a lot of expertise in various areas, you end up falling prey to just basically turning in a high school report because you don't know enough to bring something unique to the article or to the deliverable, whatever that may be.
And again, this comes back to proper positioning. If you're not an expert, don't be afraid to say so. I had 2 clients over the last year, and both of them in this discovery call, one of the areas that I took us to, remember, I'm the leader in these calls, so I'm unafraid of bringing up difficult topics. And with both of them, I said, I'm not an expert in your field, in your industry. How am I going to get the information? What process do you want to set up to where I can get the information from you to write the kind of content you need? So by being honest, I got both of those jobs. One lasted more than a year, which I thought was incredible. I gave them everything they needed. They just ran out of need, actually. And that's perfect. We were ready to move on. They were ready to move on. Another client, it was just a short-term project anyway. But I will tell you, if you do this, you also need to verify that they have the time to download their brain to yours, because that's extra work on their part, and they may still value you.
Yes.
They may still value what you bring to the table, but it's not the right fit because they don't have the time to help.
And what's important there, and you alluded to it, is when you talk to them about this, say what is the process we're going to set up? Are we going to have a weekly meeting? Are we going to, because you have to then be the one who somewhat holds them accountable for that information that you need from them. Otherwise, then they begin to resent, I'm paying them and we're not getting anything done, or we were supposed to hit certain milestone by this time.
And that's, see, again, You're the power person in these discussions because you need to see these red flags. They're not going to. Don't rely on your prospect to tell you, I don't think this is a good fit. I want you to be willing to walk away. I want you to be in the position of choosing your clients. It's the only way to get the ideal client.
And there was one client, I remember you were interviewing with them, and it was so bad, I literally grabbed some red flags and kept walking in front of your computer, like, waving the red flag. No, don't go here.
So I'm in a discovery call trying to hide my laugh as my husband is walking in front of me with red flags.
It's like, because it may seem, and it was actually a potentially lucrative contract, but it would have just been a bear, and it would have actually undermined your authority in the industry because they weren't going to see you as that partner.
And see, again, they didn't value me enough. One of the people in that conversation did. Everyone else was trying to put me down. Listen, you don't need to take that. You are a business owner. I want you to really get that in your head. You are a partner to your clients. They're not a new boss. You didn't leave a full-time job to get 3 more bosses. You left your full-time job to become a boss.
Now, it might be a different topic for a different day, but how do you deal with, okay, I don't have a choice. I'm in this relationship. Do I salvage it? Do I walk away? Sometimes, when you're talking about positioning yourself, sometimes in that discovery call and you start seeing these red flags, sometimes you can make a shift in that where you establish the degree to which you're going to relinquish authority or not. So these are my boundaries.
Yes.
And if they step into it and acknowledge those boundaries, it might be salvageable.
I think it can be, actually. I've worked with clients who weren't ideal clients. And I've worked with clients who pushed the limits, these boundaries that you set up. And that's basically scope of work, if you think about it. What scope of work did you agree on? And are they pushing back on it, trying to get free work from you? I've actually had a couple of prospects ask for free work because, we're going to hire you down the road. This is a sneaky one, but it's a way they're pushing against your boundaries and seeing, is she a pushover? Listen, don't be a pushover, whether you've been hired by them or not.
Boundaries are a huge issue in life in general. We could do a whole series of podcasts.
We could do a whole podcast
on setting boundaries and how to manage them and how to maintain them. But the bottom line is, once you set them, if the other person doesn't respect them, that's a red flag that is oftentimes irredeemable. That's not going to be something you can change because it's a perception on their end, and you can't really change someone's mind. You can inform them about your boundaries, but if they don't acknowledge them, there's little you can do except to walk away. And actually, sometimes that's the best way to preserve the relationship, is to walk away from something that's going to take it beyond its ability to maintain and sustain.
That is so true. And again, I'm just going to keep saying it. Don't be afraid to walk away. It will elevate their perception of you. The fact that you didn't need them, that you could walk away and do perfectly fine without them, kind of wows them a little bit. I've had a client come back to me later and go, well, this is all I can afford. What can you do for this? And what they were telling me is, I may have disrespected you price-wise earlier, but I value you more because you walked away from me previously. That you've got that kind of thing going on. It's you deciding what you can handle and then making sure that you set all of these terms in advance. So during this discovery call and any subsequent call, sometimes it takes more than one call, you're ironing out the details of how you'll work together and the terms. Make sure you create a good contract. That's the secret to setting boundaries. Because if it's
we should do a whole nother episode on contracts, because that's something that small business people really struggle with, is pushing back on a contract. Particularly when we're dealing with a bigger brand and they have a really hard contract. Being able to maintain my boundaries when they're pushing to protect theirs. But this is really interesting, and I wish maybe we should do a podcast on setting appropriate boundaries in business, because that's a whole different thing from setting appropriate boundaries in our personal lives, but there's a lot of crossover, isn't there?
There really is. And it is, again, we're working with people. We like to think, especially when you're a brand new solopreneur or freelancer, you're looking for clients. What are you really looking for? If you're thinking about it, if you dig into what you're saying, I need someone to pay me. And you're still thinking like an employee at that point. You haven't created enough value. You haven't created the perception of value for people to choose you.
I love what you say to other solopreneurs in the hub and places like that, where you say you need to get rid of that employee mindset and replace it with a CEO mindset.
That's
You're the
exactly
CEO of your company, regardless of how big it is. And CEOs, typically you think of a corporation and a board and all that, but essentially you are the chief executive officer of your business and your brand. And if you think like that, yes, I don't have a lot of other people to pass the buck to or to hand something off to, but at the end of the day, it's my decision. And that's the role of the CEO. He's the one who has to set the course, and that's you. And if you're seen like that, if you see yourself like that, other people will see you and regard you more highly. And it's different for every industry, because there are some industries where the pricing has to be very high because the amount of work it takes for one deliverable is more than for other industries, where you can maybe take on 10 clients in one kind of industry and you can really only handle 2 or 3 if you're in a different kind of industry.
And the type of product you deliver. So that's the value of productizing, the way Russ Henneberry talks about it, is you come up with packages that you can put together quickly and easily and price as high as possible. I mean, that's the gold standard. The least amount of time from you for the highest amount of money. If you can achieve that and people buy that package, you can take on an unlimited number of clients. The more work, the more time it takes, the smaller your margins, because you can only raise your prices so much. And again, that's why this matters. That's why picking the right clients matters. Pick an industry that you know and that you know will value what you do. And then make sure that you pick people who you know, like, and trust. You want to sell yourself as someone who is knowable, that they like you, they trust you, but you need to feel the same way about your clients.
Think about how when we come into a relationship with a friend or an acquaintance that becomes a friend, what is it that causes that relationship to grow? It's like, the things that we like interests, like shared values. These are things that cause us to go from acquaintance to friend. And the same is true with our clients. If we want that client to be the ideal client, they have to have some of the shared interests, the shared values, the shared passions, the shared mission, because then we can become passionate alongside of them. And then they will value us more because they get excited because you're excited, and that builds that relationship even further, doesn't it?
It so does. I mean, you said it perfectly. It's the same as dealing with your friends. And I've had many clients become friends because of that very thing. We're people, we're relating to one another as people, we're treating one another with the same respect and liking that I would treat a friend with. And over time, that translates, and it makes you invaluable. It makes you irreplaceable. And that's what you want. To succeed in business, you need to be so desirable and so irreplaceable that you're the first choice. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. This is such a good conversation. Gary Bencivenga, I'm not quite sure how to say his last name, though I recognize it immediately. Gary Bencivenga once said, only take on clients who are winners. But I want to add to that. For today's episode, the takeaway is this: only take on clients who you can win with. That's going to make you a winner as well. So thanks again. Go ahead and take a minute to subscribe to the Solopreneur Life Podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And in the meantime, go check out Solopreneur Life, the Solo Summit. Jonathan, what's the URL for that?
It's solopreneurlife.com/summit.
Oh, Solo Summit. That's right. We just published the landing page recently, and that's why I don't know the URL. But yes.
However, if they'll just go to the Solopreneur Life website, solopreneurlife.com. I'll throw that up here on the screen again in a minute. there'll be a link to the summit. But it's solopreneurlife.com/solo summit. Am I right?
That's right. All right. Meet us there. I definitely want you to get more of the amazing wisdom and goodness that we got from last year's speakers. And we are lining up some amazing speakers. So do that. Subscribe to the podcast, and I'll see you next week. In the meantime, stay awesome.